Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Thom Hartmann live on the air with us. I'm also joined by Egberto Willies, who is also a political commentator here at KPFT. He's host of Politics Done Right, heard Thursdays 3 p.m. Welcome, Egberto. Welcome, Mr. Hartmann.
Hey, thank you.
How you doing, Thom?
Good. How are you?
All's good, all's good. Great to hear your voice once again.
Thank you.
Man, an intense introduction hearing about the murder of those Nigerian protesters they posted a video of our president and his fear tactics that he's using on this whole caravan situation to justify their murders. You said that our president doesn't know what the consequences are of his words.
Or, as I was hearing myself say that, because, Patrick clipped that up from today's show, it occurred to me, he may well know the consequences of his words. I'm certain people around him have repeatedly tried to tell him the consequences of his words. He just doesn't care. As long as he wins, he doesn't care what kind of damage. He didn't care how many people were destroyed by Trump University, who were, young people thrown into bankruptcy, set back a decade or more in their lives. He didn't care about the thousands of people who got screwed by this multi-level marketing scheme that we had Judd Legume on the show today talking about how there's now a RICO lawsuit against him, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization Act, for this MLM thing that he was part of. He just doesn't care. He doesn't care that he destroys people's lives. He doesn't care. He doesn't pay his contractors. Some of them have gone out of business. He doesn't care. He's a classic sociopath. He believes the only person on the planet is him. Everybody else is basically just, meat. And the few people close to him who keep him stroked and keep him happy. And that's it. He doesn't care.
It's kind of interesting because you sit down and watch the people who follow him, and you wonder what is a pathology within them that cannot see what all of us here in this sphere actually see. What do you think is the cause of all of that?
There's John Dean wrote a book about this a while ago. It's called Conservatives Without Conscience. And he based it on a book called The Authoritarians. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the author, but the book is still in print. And what he found was that about 20% of the population is inclined toward authoritarianism. That's their natural inclination. They believe that in a family, the father should be not just the head of the household, but should run it with an iron fist. And that in government, you want to have strong and powerful leaders. And they themselves tend to be and we've all known people like this, the kiss up, kick down kind of person. They're the people who suck up to those above them and just absolutely dump on the people below them. And that kind of personality, there's a big debate about whether it's made or born. It appears that there's some sort of temperamental, genetic component to it. In other words, some of us are just kind of born leaning that way. But the one thing we know is that if you look at populations who came of age, who were children and matured into their early adulthood during times of great stress, like a war in their country, that 20% number suddenly becomes 40, 50, 60%. And so, and then there's a whole another science of epigenetics. Does that mean that this actually gets encoded into their DNA and passed down to future generations? That if you can have 5, 6 generations of peace, then that authoritarian tendency is kind of weeded out of our gene pool. And if you have 4 or 5 generations of war, that it gets amplified. And really nobody knows. I mean, this is a very, very, brand new area of science. But I think that that's what it is. And Trump was an authoritarian follower as a child. His father was an authoritarian, and he has become an authoritarian leader as an adult. And so all the authoritarian followers out there who would be inclined to watch Fox News, because Fox News is set up in this very hierarchical, we will tell you what's going on, Sean Hannity, I am the big daddy way, that naturally draws these authoritarian follower types. And it's like 99 to 1. 99% of authoritarians are actually followers. 1% are actually leaders, out of the gate. And so, they're just always looking for an authoritarian leader. And when they see each other, they immediately know each other. Oh yeah, that's my guy. He's just like me. He thinks he views the world the way I do. And we're not that. And so it seems weird to us.
Yeah, really strange. And I'd like to think that Pacifica, including our sister stations, KPFK in Los Angeles and WBAI in Washington, WPFW in Washington, all the other Pacifica stations, that we're sort of an antithesis to the Fox propaganda, that we're about inclusivity and love instead of hate, and caring about all the people in the world. And like Amy Goodman likes to say, this is brought to you by listeners like you and not like you, like all of us coming together. And
I love it.
And your show is very popular here on the mornings, and we run it every 6 a.m. every weekday. And we had an enormous number of people donate to it this morning. But we're very proud to have you live on KPFT right now, and we're hoping that will inspire some additional persons to come in for public broadcasting for Pacifica. Did you know Pacifica actually invented the whole idea of like the fund drive, of like going on the air?
Oh,
and
yeah.
asking, and
in fact, it was your station. It was KPFT, wasn't it? And you've been bombed twice. Am I remembering all that right?
Yes, you are.
Well, we came a little bit late to the Pacifica was started like in the 40s by these war resistors that were like literally sitting around the campfire at the conscientious objectors camp, and they were like, what can we do to prevent like war and misunderstanding? Like, well, what if we had a radio station? And they started the Berkeley station, and then the Houston station came along in 1971, and we've survived all these years from fund drive to fund drive, being paid for by our listeners voluntarily. And so here we are in our fall fund drive. And
what's that number?
713-526-5738.
5738.
Yeah, it's very kind of you to let us have your show for free on the Pacifica stations. And I mean, what do you think about public radio as like an antithesis to the whole Fox News right-wing hate radio echo chamber?
I think it's really important. I think it's vital. I think without voices from the community and voices, people putting together, actually doing the hard work of putting together a good, half-hour show, an hour show, whatever it may be, and saying, here we're here, present you with the ideas, the facts, the controversy, the discussion, calls, whatever it may be. I think without that, we're all the poorer. I mean, our communities are poorer, and increasingly now, with the death of net neutrality, now that the Republicans have destroyed net neutrality, and Comcast and AT&T and Verizon and all these companies literally now have the legal ability to say, oh, you wanna stream, or you want to visit a progressive website? Not so much. It's going to be a little slow. Sorry. You want to view a conservative website that Comcast loves? Oh, hey, click right through. And it's already, Google has already downgraded both Think Progress and Alternet to the point that they're basically not being spidered by Google any longer because they're, quote, controversial. I mean, Think Progress, Alternet, I mean, these are not even far left. It's just, progressive sites. You see a whiff of communism in any of these places. And yet there's still, Google is still spidering, and promoting, not promoting, you understand what I mean.
Right.
It's still spidering the conservative sites. I mean, they may have stopped Breitbart, but Breitbart's the lunatic fringe. I mean, they're still doing, Buckley's National Review and stuff like that. And they're far farther to the right than Alternet or Think Progress are to the left. I mean, it's just nuts. So it's even more important as our internet is getting ring fenced by these giant corporations that just want to make a buck and have deep conservative roots in many cases. It's even more important to have community radio like KPFT.
That is so true. I tell you, even with the websites we do or websites I have, and I'm pretty sure your website as well, we are starting to have to go to what's called the subscription model because, again, what Google and Facebook and all of these are doing with throttling down, and it seems that they're specifically throttling down progressive sites. But I have a question with regards to the election. What are your thoughts as far as the Senate is concerned? I have some thoughts, but I want to see how they match up with yours. I mean, everybody thinks that there's not a chance in hell that we are going to get the Senate, that the progressives will get the Senate. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. I really don't know. The wild card in this election is voter suppression.
Mm-hmm.
You see on TV all these races that are neck and neck, 50-50 over and over again. And of course, some of the networks really they want that 50-50 because that causes people to watch more television.
Right.
And so they'll give lots and lots of press to one side or the other until they're up to 50-50. And then at that point, they kind of stop covering both sides and move on to the next state and do it again. And what that doesn't take into account for, I mean, that's just polling. And they're polling people who think that they're registered to vote. But we know that, from Greg Palast's work,
right,
that 340,000 people in Georgia who still live in Georgia and still have permanent addresses were purged from the voting rolls just in the last 12 months. But nationwide, it's 14.4 million people, and that's according to the Brennan Center. That's as solid and credible as you get.
Right.
And so, and that's more than 10% of the total vote electorate in the 2016 election. I mean, that was only about 135 million people who voted.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, 14,000 people is massive, or 14 million people is massive.
Right.
And I'm ready for anything. I think it's entirely possible if the Republicans hold the House and the Senate, and we make a very rapid 2-year slide into total fascism. Or it's very possible the Democrats take back the House, and if they have enough progressives and enough wind behind them, they may take down this presidency, or at least slow down this slide into, what Vice President Henry Wallace identified as fascism.
It is fascism. I have this wild, and this is just sort of anecdotal. I just have this wild guess that even as these people poll, that a lot of those Republicans that are really running to the polls right now are not necessarily running to the polls to support Republicans. I just wonder if I just deep inside, being somebody from somewhere else, I just cannot believe that all these folks are really going to take us over the brink.
Watch Fox News for about 3 hours some afternoon or early evening. You may change your mind. But I hope you're right. I really hope you're right.
I hope I am too.
And you've talked a lot about how they're using fear on the right side, the right side of the spectrum, to manipulate us, to disable our words, and to appeal to the most primitive parts of the brain. And KPFT, unlike the other Pacifica stations, we broadcast to an audience that actually is majority Republican voters, at least among those people that actually vote. And we have a sense of what they may be thinking. And from what I understand, basically they're expecting a caravan of transgender Muslims with leprosy and small children following Nancy Pelosi riding 7 dark horses provided by the New York Times and MSNBC to ride through their town, burning it down and destroying Western civilization. Is that accurate?
I love it. That was brilliant. Yeah, that is what they think.
That's just what we hear from our listeners.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, what's so ironic is that we have something that is truly frightening if we wanted to play the fear card, and that is the death of every human being on this planet, and the end of life on Earth for anything larger than a cat, which is what happened the last time the planet warmed as rapidly as it is now to the levels that it could in the next 100 years. The Permian mass extinction 250 million years ago. That is a very real possibility, and we're already to the point of a certainty that hundreds of millions of people are right now being impacted by climate change in ways that are destructive to civilization, to their countries, to their, in Bangladesh and Pakistan. This is the Syrian civil war started because the desert moved 100 miles south, and over 1 million farmers got pushed off their farms into Damascus and other big cities. The Libyan civil war started for that reason. In fact, it appears now that the entire Arab Spring, the whole Tunisian wheat crisis, was because the crop failed because of global warming. And it all started in Tunisia with a guy who set himself on fire. That all of that was the result of global climate change. That, climate change, in fact, is driving, we know now, there was a piece in The Guardian, they was either yesterday or the day before, that it's climate change that is throwing farmers off their lands in Honduras and Guatemala, running them into the cities, and fomenting social upheaval. And you combine that with, billionaire right-wingers in the United States supporting right-wingers in the Central American countries, as we've done since the Reagan years. And you've got this, just explosive stew. But the reality is that climate change could take us all down, and is already taking many of us down, and is every year now responsible for literally millions of deaths. And that's real, and that's real scary stuff. And, we're barely talking about it, much less fear-mongering with it. But even, but with that, we don't have to make up lies like Trump does to scare people. So
we just have to tell them the truth. Now, look, what we talk about a lot of times is scary to people on our side. They try to scare with lies. The people are coming to invade us, all that good stuff. What we are talking about here is the reality science, and how the climate's going to be destructive, and also how the current socioeconomic system is not so sustainable. The form of capitalism practiced in this country is not sustainable. The results are quite obvious, the transition of all the wealth upward. Now, we have a voice. Our station, you have a voice with all the stations where your program is played. What is it going to take? What is it going to take for us to get deeper penetration? Because, as you know, and as much as we can consider the media, or many want to consider the media liberal, they're not doing what we are doing. They're not out there really challenging the status quo. They are almost maintaining the status quo themselves.
By we, are you talking about public radio?
I'm talking
radio?
Public radio and real progressive media. Right now, there are a whole lot of independent progressives on the internet trying to get a message out. But of course, it doesn't have the performance of large broadcasting or large cable news.
Mm-hmm. There is a kind of a platform effect. I think that probably the biggest challenge that we all have going forward is curation. Mm-hmm. For my show, I need to make sure that I'm really, and this is the work. We do 3 hours on the air, and we probably do 5 hours or 6 hours every day getting ready for that. And it's like defining, what's really going to work. How do you put together a rant that pulls together 2 or 3 elements where people slap their forehead and go, "Holy cow, I never thought of that." We carefully curate the content of our show. I think similarly, media sites, whether it's progressive websites or whether it's community radio, need to be carefully curating their content, making sure that the programs that they're carrying are programs that actually are meaningful to people, and actually, are more than just, I used to refer to this as complaint radio. I decided a long time ago we're never going to do complaint radio. It's not, and I hear a lot of that on the right. Let's complain about Obama, but they never offer solutions. They never offer, answers. They never offer a deep history. So I think to the extent that it can be done in the media on our side, that's our big challenge now. They've been doing that on the right for a lot of years, and they've got it down pretty tight now. But we're still working on it.
Yeah, I work with Coffee Party, worked with Move to Amend and Bridge Alliance, and all these other organizations that are trying to put all of these pieces together. But it just seems so difficult on the left side, because we just don't have the type of support that they have on the right side. And whoever or whenever we break that code, I think that is what is going to take. Whenever we break the funding code, whenever we break the access code. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, y'all, we are funded by our listeners here at KPFT, and we've hung on to this 100,000 watt beacon of progressive radio in Houston, Texas, for all these years, and we need to continue to do so, which means that we have to raise money to pay our bills. Next week we won't be in fund drive at all. We had a great run for the political talk shows in the morning, but this afternoon edition of the Thom Hartmann Show, 3 o'clock on Friday afternoons, rebroadcast, also needs to raise money and make its fund drive goals for this hour. So it really is necessary that our listeners call in to 713-526-5738 to support this community public radio station, and I feel like we've been cracking the code for years here with KPFT. At KPFT, when I started listening to it, just as like a teenager out in the suburbs, it opened my mind to different ways of thinking. It's something I put on when I'm alone, and so I feel like it's for many years. These extremely educated friends like Thom Hartmann that broaden my mind and tell me things I didn't already know, and I feel like we, as we've said, we have to. Well, obviously, we have to fight back against the conservative fear mongers and all this nonsense, and fight for the common person, which is something that Thom does in his show. If you listen to it, then you already know that, and something that KPFT does as a part of its mission. And I feel like in this city of all large American cities of almost 7 million people, we know not to fear the immigrant, because immigrants are our friends. They're part of our family. Like my sister married a man that's here on a green card from Mexico, and they've been together for many years, and he's a great guy. They love each other very much. Like the man that was teaching me about pecan trees yesterday came from a family of immigrants. Like we know in Houston, Texas, how this ends with immigrants, and it's not what the Trump people are trying to scare America into. And so somehow we've got to break that mind control, break that influence they have. But to work our way out of this mess, we have to have stations like KPFT. So 713-526-5738. For those reasons, for whatever reason you like KPFT, we really do need y'all to call, please.
And look, we have Thom live on air right now. How best to close this hour out?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Then giving us a call at 713-526-5738. Thom, I don't know if you remembered an article that you kind of quoted on one of your shows, Political Malpractice Kills, an article I wrote for Daily Kos. I was so excited when you actually quoted that one. I had to get that little snippet out.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. I'm glad and thank you for writing for Daily Kos. There's some Daily Kos is one of a handful of websites that I not only I check every day when I'm doing show prep, but I also check every hour during my breaks to see if any. That's one of the places where I look for essentially breaking news.
So, absolutely. It is. I don't know if you've realized how much they've grown since. I mean, it's like it's a huge progressive organization right now, probably one of the largest in the country.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyhow,
I remember.
Yeah, folks, 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. And while we know that calls are going to come in, let's ask Thom, any calls came in for Thom yet?
Not yet. We need y'all to call. Please. Yeah. We have a very reasonable goal this hour, $250 we're trying to raise for Thom Hartmann in this hour. We'd love to just blow that away and help pay for this radio station. But to complicate it a little more, there's another number I'm going to give. If you want to call and ask Thom a question yourself in the next 15 minutes or so, there's a different number. It's 713-526-5752. 713-526-5752 if you want to ask Thom a question yourself. Or 713-526-5738 to make a donation.
Okay, Thom, you wrote that book about the crash. Where are you putting the chances of the crash right now? I am lost with the deficit plus the deficit spending, the size of our debt, and the impending social network collapse. What are your thoughts about the actual economic collapse right now?
I think it's really, really bad. Unfortunately, publishers pick book titles, and so the book should have just been titled "Crash" rather than "The Crash of 2016." Because really, what it starts in '71 with the Powell memo,
right?
And talks about how basically the right-wing takeover of American government, which followed over the next 15 years after the Powell memo, the right-wing takeover was really a business takeover, and as business took over, they rewrote the rules of capitalism to deregulate themselves in ways that made them more profitable over the short term, but made the entire system more vulnerable. They undid. I mean, FDR looked back on the 20s and the deregulation of the Harding and Coolidge administrations in particular, and said this is what caused the Great Crash, and they put into place Glass-Steagall and all these other things. And then since Reagan, many of those protections have been pulled out. I go through those in the book, and how this is 2008. The crash in 2008 is not over yet.
Right.
And we've been holding everything together with baling wire and bubble gum and inflating it with even negative interest rates, very, very low interest rates. And now in the last 2 years, the Trump administration, I think one of the main reasons that they wanted to have their $1 trillion tax cut was because they knew it would goose the economy, or at least goose the stock market.
Yeah, the sugar high.
Working person has not seen any of this, but the stock market is up, and it's going to run out. It's going to peter out, and now you've got this massive derivatives market out there. It's over 300 times global GDP. And it's not even traded on regulated exchanges.
Right. And
it was the derivatives that took down the world in 2008. And guess what? The derivatives are back this time. They're still doing them on mortgages. Now they're doing them on student loans and on car loans in the United States, and they're doing them on sovereign debt all over the world. And we're pretty much back where we were in 2008. The system has not been repaired, and we're going to, in my opinion, drop right back into that. Whether it's going to happen, next month or next year or 2 years from now, I don't know. There is a big political piece to this. The Bushies knew in 2007, early 2008 that their crash was coming. They knew it was coming, and they tried to throw everything they could at it to stop it from happening before the election. And had Lehman not failed, they probably would have. But Lehman was so egregious. It just took everything else down with it. I'm pretty certain that Trump is trying, and the Republicans are trying to do the same thing. And even if it takes adding another $1 trillion to the deficit or whatever, or threatening the Fed chair to keep interest rates low, they're going to do everything they can to hold this off until 2020. And then, the plan that Bush had in 2008 was, the day after the election, let it all go to hell. And, you can blame it on a Democrat picking up the White House, which was possible then, or more likely that the Democrats would control the Senate. But they would blame it on the Democrats, and we already know Trump is going to blame this on the Democrats. He's already said, if there's a stock market, dip, it's going to be because the Democrats won on November 5th or 6th, whatever day it is, Tuesday of next week. And get ready. Here we go.
There's one problem that I have, Tom, and that is, I think the Democrats are so poor at fight. They punch back, but they don't foresee. And I think there's a whole lot to be foreseen right now that needs to be that they need to prepare sort of a preamble to what we know is going to happen to the economy, to what we know is going to happen to the stock market. Nobody's talking about that, and in doing so, they leave the door open for what the Republicans are very good at, and that is accusing them of being the causality of what's going to occur, as opposed to letting America know that based on what has been done in the last 2 years, this is what's likely to happen. And we don't hear Democrats saying that.
Well, and part of the problem is that, as the Koch brothers have said, when they support Republican candidates, they consider that an investment. They use that language because if they put, $800 million into an election, they'll get an $800 billion tax cut. I mean, literally.
Right.
So it's 1,000 to 1 return on investment, or 100 to 1 return on investment. And you can't get that anywhere else. Right now, for billionaires, politics is the best investment they can make. Buying legislation that protects their industries and their wealth. On the left, it's the exact opposite. Every time Tom Steyer puts another $1 million into an election, he's increasing the probabilities his taxes are going to go up. So what on the right they've done is they've taken all that money that they've made from seizing control of government and used it to fund think tanks and groups that sit around and think about this kind of stuff that you're talking about right now. How do we message our way out of a recession? How do we blame it on the Democrats? How do we most effectively message, what are the 10 things that Americans are most afraid of, and how can we scare them more? Or what are the things people most want? Should we actually go out and lie in our television ads and say, yes, we support protections on pre-existing conditions, for example? And they have a coherent message because they've got these giant, well-funded, multi-million-dollar think tanks with really smart people in them who are doing the work. And there's no institutional infrastructure like that on the left. There's a couple of, relatively small economic think tanks. CEPR is one of the better ones. They've got a little tiny budget. They have 10 or 12 employees. and nobody in the Democratic Party is collaborating with them. They're not funding the Democratic Party, whereas on the Republican side, the big think tanks, they're not only funding the Republicans, they're funding talk radio. Ken Vogel did a piece for Politico last year, 3 years ago now, about how Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity are making like $1 million a year and just like a donation from the Heritage Foundation. And not just them, a bunch of right-wing radio guys. I get not one penny from anybody.
Yeah, I want to ask you, and since you're on the air in Houston, in a conservative, large American city, and we got some conservative listeners out there, that they've been told that George Soros is behind everything, and we've been waiting for that check from Mr. Soros to come here at KPFT. I'm curious if you've gotten yours yet, or is it how much?
No.
Does he write you a postcard every morning, or?
No. George Soros is code for the international Jew, was the phrase that the Nazis used, and that's been used by anti-Semites in the United States, for forever. And he's Jewish. He was born in Hungary. He fled the Holocaust, and he gives a small amount of money to democratic causes. Mostly, he funds civic society things around the world. Democracy. Totally in non-political ways. He's interested in good government, because he saw what happens when governments go bad when he was a child. That's why he had to flee Hungary. But it's just disgraceful how the Republicans have been using his picture and his name as a stand-in for Jews. I think it led directly to that murder at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Oh man, that's awful. It is absolutely awful. Before you said that, I guess I'll do it anyway. I wanted to side note about George Soros, just an interesting fun fact. That heavy thing just poured some cold water on it. But okay, as a fun thing about George Soros, did you know that Soros is the Esperanto word to soar, which means to fly, but future tense it means will soar. And his father, he and his father were fluent Esperanto speakers. And
really?
Yeah, not many people know this about Mr. Soros.
Wow. I have a friend whose father helped invent Esperanto.
Wow, really? That's elite.
Yeah. Lelio Aragones is his name.
Do you speak it?
It was amazing. That's a fancy. I didn't know that.
Mi povas instrui vin Esperanto se vi volas lerni. Estas tre bela lingvo. But
I don't know how to say that's really cool, but that's really cool.
But yeah, still George Soros doesn't send the checks. I'm still waiting. 713-526-5738 to donate to KPFT. It all goes to pay for this radio station, and in particular these political shows in the afternoons. Thom Hartmann show heard here Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. as well as 6 a.m. every weekday. And we have actually an anonymous donor who was willing to match, it's not a match. He's willing to put in $200 if we reach our goal of $250 today. And we've had a couple calls. We're going to have a few people thank in a few minutes here, but I don't think we've reached the 250. So if we could reach that 250, this anonymous donor will add in $200. And I want to thank I want to thank our volunteers out there taking calls: Diana, Tarshira, Stuart, Hank, Captain Tom, Tex, and Thomas out on the phones. And they're all here because they believe in this radio station. So are we. We're all volunteers here today. Tom's not going to get a check from us or Soros, and we're hoping to get some donations from y'all to support this noble effort, this noble thing, which is Pacifica Station KPFT in Houston, Texas. And that number is, in case you're poised to dial, it's 713-526-5738.
Of course they're poised to dial. 713-526-5738. Come on, folks. Call in now. We need to hear from you. Now, Tom, let me put you on the spot a little bit. Any new books on the horizon?
Yeah, I just finished writing. Actually, I'm probably 5 days away from finishing editing a book called "The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment," and that will be out in June of next year. And then I've got a book, "The Hidden History of the Supreme Court," which will be out in either the winter of a year from now or in the spring in the following season. And that book is about 3/4 written right now. And then Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, Troy Miller and I spent the last year and a half, bringing all the climate science in it up to date, because the last time I'd updated that book was 2004. And that just came out in a new edition last week. and it's available in bookstores and online and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm up to.
And look, I'm on my second book. How do you do it? I mean, when do you get a chance to write?
You know, years ago, I used to write for magazines and stuff, and made a living for it, doing it for a while. And I was at a friend's house, so Michael Kurland, he's a novelist, and we were having breakfast in his home, and there was this 300-page manuscript sitting on the counter ready to go out to the publisher. And I said, Michael, how do you do that? And he said, 5 pages a day. And I said, what do you mean 5 pages a day? And he said, I write 5 pages a day. And I said, well, why not write 10 or 12? And he said, because I write 5 pages a day. And I said, but don't you want to think of end of thought? And he's like, no, you always try to end in the middle, because that way you can pick it up the next day. You're not looking at a blank page. And so, being a compulsive overachiever, I went home and I said to Louise, I'm going to start writing 10 pages a day. Because Michael said, you write 5 pages a day, in 3 months you've written a book, and then you edit it at 15 pages a day, so you edit it in 1 month, and so in 4 months you can produce a book. And Michael has been producing, 2 or 3 books a year for 30 years. And so I started doing that. That was in like 1993, 94, something like that. No, it was like 1988 or 89. And I wrote 5 of the world's worst novels. I wrote 2 nonfiction books that are absolutely not worthy of publication. Things that never saw the light of day. But I think it was Arthur Clarke said, your first 1,000,000 words are practice. And it was certainly the case with me. But 5 pages a day.
Well, you know what? You just gave me my call-in orders. It's going to be 10 pages a day, Thom. 10 pages a day. You just gave me my call-in orders.
But you know what? That's a great
That's
connection.
double space.
Yes.
That sounds like a really cool method for writing. But also segue into asking y'all to give money to this radio station, because we will send you a copy of Thom Hartmann's books. We're focusing on Screwed, the undeclared war on the middle class, and how you can fight back. With your $100 donation, we'll take part of that $100 and use that to send you a copy of that book. Or you can also get a copy of The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, which is another brilliant book by Mr. Hartmann, for your $100 donation to KPFT. And we're not going to send you that money to Thom. We're going to keep all of it here in Houston for KPFT. 713-526.
We're very happy to provide our show to you guys for free.
Okay, folks.
The number.
We have the man on the air right now.
The man himself.
The man himself, Thom Hartmann. Give us a call at 713-526-5738. You cannot beat this. And Patrick, have some thankings to do.
Well, how about if I say their name, and maybe Mr. Hartmann would thank them.
Sure.
Thom, please.
Oh, Thom. I'm sorry, Thom.
Come on, Patrick.
I'm sorry, I got that Texas training going here. Kimberly has donated from Katie. Would you like to thank Kimberly?
Thank you, Kimberly.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for playing along. And also Casey in Houston.
Thank you, Casey.
All right. And Wonder Douglas from Humble.
Thank you, Douglas.
And they have gotten us to $150 of our $250 goal. If we can make just another $100 donated to us, our anonymous donor will kick in another $200, and she's serious. She won't kick it in unless we really do.
We have the time to do it, folks. We have the time to do it, and we have Thom on the line right now, so we deserve for you to call it now. 713-526-5738. I want to hear those phones ringing. 713-526-5738. I can feel it coming. 713-526-5738. Now, Thom, we have to change the world. What else can we do? What you're doing is very important. I actually been to your operation in D.C. I don't know if you remember the coffee party, Enough is Enough rally that we had out there in the snowstorm.
Oh, yeah.
That's so amazing.
Amazing.
That was an amazing event. But anyhow, so what else do we do? I mean, your operation is one operation of what we need to have many of around the country. How do we get there?
When you look at social movements and you look at real cultural and political change, it always starts with individuals. It's not people at the top. It's not media big shots or political blowhards. It's people talking to their friends. You know, the pool of people who are calling in right now to KPFT just to make contributions to our listening to the show, if every person listening were to just make a commitment over the next month, over the next 30 days, to get one other person to regularly listen to this station. Now, you may have to talk to 5 or 10 people to do that, right? You may have to talk to 3 or 4, whatever it is. but one extra person. If everybody did that, we would double the universe of listeners, which dramatically improves the influence, the power, the effectiveness of
4 minutes left. 713-526-57. We can do this. Thom, I heard the phone ring. 713-526-573. Come on, folks. We need another $100, and you can pull us over.
Hey,
and go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, 713-526-5738. We really do need y'all to call. And in the closing minutes, in addition to asking y'all to call, I also, while I have Thom cornered, I do want to mention on your show, you keep saying that Beto O'Rourke, we want to claim him as a Texan. I also want to claim him as an English major and a web developer, personally. But also, he's not a millennial. He's Gen X, man. Everybody keeps saying he's millennial.
Okay.
It's
okay.
like,
Thank you.
Everybody skips the Generation X. What is that?
You know, Thom, Patrick is feeling. Patrick is sort of feeling bad. Patrick, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying Patrick is really feeling it now because he wants to be included so badly. He wants that Gen X to be called because he thinks that's a forgotten generation.
Yeah, call for Thom Hartmann, KPFT right now. I'm calling DL Gen Xers, 713-526-5738 for the underemployed, for the people that are still waiting for the next generation above us to retire, which they never will. 713-526-5738.
Come on, folks. 713-526-573. And I know when Patrick turns his head and look at that screen, he's going to look on the camera and see somebody answering the phone. Am I correct, Patrick, at all?
We have one phone active, but we've got two phones active, it looks like. But we're waiting. We got Diana, Tarsheen, Stewart, Hank, Captain Tom, Tex, and Thomas are all ready to take your calls out there. So we have capacity to take some more. 713-526-5738.
Well, look, Thom, I mean, it's been a pleasure having you on air with us today. Like I said, you are one of the programs here that is very well liked and listened to. And this morning, I must say that we did extremely well with your program.
Great. Thank you. And hopefully we can wrap up this hour and meet that $200 match or bonus or whatever the word is.
We are, sir, we are going to get that bonus because I think there are 2 calls on, and we are going to make sure that, well, come on, folks, give us a call, 713-526-5738. Thank you very much for being with us, Thom.
It has been an honor. It has been an honor and a pleasure.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES, that is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.